This is the Patriots Catch-22 podcast with Evan Lazar and Alex Barth.
I'm Evan Lazar. Evan Lazar. Hello, everybody.
Nailed it. Joined as always by our Barth.
That's a fit. That's a match.
No risk it, no biscuit.
22.
Here is Evan Lazar and Alex Barth.
You know the distracted boyfriend meme?
Yeah.
It's you, Josh Allen, and Drake May.
Why is everybody so obsessed with me and Josh Allen?
Because you're obsessed with Josh Allen.
Well, I am not obsessed with Josh Allen. That's not true. I said one thing to him in the tunnel in Orchard Park one time, like 2 years ago, and I haven't been able to live it down since.
I just showed you a funny meme. You're the one that's getting defensive.
That sounds about right. I just showed you a funny meme, and you're the one that's getting defensive. Is like basically the crux of our entire friendship.
Pretty much.
That's what it's all about. All right, Evan Lazar, Alex Barth. Sorry we're late. Sorry, everybody. Sorry. There was an accident maybe on 93 here in Boston, and it took me about an hour and 30 minutes to get here. Not that anybody cares about my traffic or my morning commute, but sorry we're late. All right.
Bill would sit you.
Yeah, you're right. We'd probably get cut like Jonas Gray.
Yeah.
We'd be done. I met Jonas Gray, by the way. It's something different for the organization draft party thing.
Right.
Really super nice guy.
Seems like it, yeah.
Super nice guy. Didn't deserve what he got. No, I'm just kidding. I have no idea what he did. Anyways, do you know what's easy to drink, easy to enjoy, Alex?
What?
Bud Light, the official beer sponsor of the New England Patriots. And hey, Patriots fans, if you want to see Toyota's best offers, including those not seen on TV, go to buyatoyota.com. It's Toyota's official website for deals from the official vehicle of the New England Patriots. Toyota, let's go places. All right. Today's show, we are going to go pick by pick in the Patriots draft. We're probably not going to talk too much about Drake May, because not only did we talk about him on Friday's show, so you can go listen back to Friday's show if you missed that one, but we also talked about Drake May for the last 6 months. So I think everybody pretty much knows where we stand on Drake May at this point. So we're going to go rounds 2 through 7 here. We're going to go pick by pick. We're also going to talk a little bit, I'm sure, about Christian Barmore and other Patriots news that's going on, but this is going to be our draft recap heavy show here. And my biggest takeaway from the draft is just to start big picture, and then we'll get into the minutia of each individual prospect. But my biggest takeaway from the draft, and the reason why I come off optimistic about this draft, is that offensively they drafted with a schematic plan in mind, which is what I like. I like the fact that we can argue, and I'm sure we will, and we already have emailers, and you can call in 855-PATS-500, of people that are going to debate whether they reached on certain players or they got the right players or what have you. But I think when you look at this nucleus that they're trying to build, let's take the offensive line out of it for a second and just talk quarterback with Drake May, receiver with Jalen Polk, receiver with Javon Baker. These are complementary pieces. The two receivers fit Drake May's playing style. They fit Alex Van Pelt's offense, and they're complementary to each other, where Jalen Polk is more of this move Z receiver, Javon Baker more of that prototypical down the field X receiver.
Not a ton of overlap.
Not a ton of issues in terms of this guy's kind of this and that guy. No, we know what everybody is. We see how the pieces fit together, and I also see how their skill sets, two guys that can win the ball down the field. And I know people want speed, and I know people want separation, but what these two guys do is have the hands and the body control and all that kind of stuff to really be downfield ball winners and go up and get the ball and also win through traffic, which I think is something that this regime looked at as maybe where they missed on Tyquan Thornton. Because let's face it, Elliott Wolf, Matt Groh, Cameron Williams, they were all here in 2022 when the Patriots drafted Tyquan Thornton in the second round. They were all in pretty high standing positions. Obviously, Bill Belichick had the final say in the draft, but Matt Groh is director of player personnel. Elliott Wolf was in a similar role. Cameron Williams was in a similar role. I think what they missed with Tyquan, in something that I've adjusted my process to as well as I've learned throughout the years about the draft, is just how important play strength and playing through contact is at the NFL level. Because you're not going to separate by 10 yards every single time you run a route.
Right.
9 times out of 10, you are going to be catching the ball with somebody hanging all over you, or driving the catch point from out of phase, or in traffic or high traffic areas over the middle of the field. You're not going to be able to just always run by people like you do in college. And I think we watch these guys, these speed receivers in college, and they're 10 yards behind the defense all the time, and you're like, wow, look at this speed. It's incredible. But then they get in the league, and then the passing windows, they get smaller and smaller. And at some point, you have to have play strength. You have to be able to finish through contact. I think that that's the goal with these two receivers. You have 2 guys that are ball winners, 2 guys that are accuracy erasers for the quarterback that can contort their bodies and make catches outside their catch radius, or outside their frame, I should say, with their catch radius. And you have a nice nucleus here. And the comparison that I keep going back to in my head about this group and is the Green Bay Packers, because because of the Elliott Wolf connection, that's obvious. But B, when you look at what they're doing in 2022, the Packers drafted Christian Watson in the 2nd round, Romeo Doubs in the 4th round. Then they came back last year and drafted Jaden Reed on day 2. And then they have this young quarterback in Jordan Love who's got a howitzer, right? And they put it all together, and now you have a young nucleus to your offense that's cheap, cost-controlled, under contract, and building together and growing together and developing together. Obviously, Green Bay, what's going on there in Packerland, that's a ceiling for how this could go. Right? They won a playoff game in Dallas last year. They're probably going to be a dark horse candidate to win the Super Bowl this year. The other team that I would look at, and similarly, is the Houston Texans. You have Nico Collins, you have Tank Dell, you have CJ Stroud, right? You have these young players that are blossoming together. The Texans, unlike the Packers, because the Packers never spend in free agency or do anything splashy, the Texans then added this offseason by trading for Stephon Diggs. So if the Patriots want to follow the Texans model, then this year they hope that they see that they have something going with these guys, and then they make the Diggs type trade next offseason.
And that puts the cap on top of things.
Yeah. And maybe that's the way that they go about it. But for right now, I think you can be excited if you're a Patriots fan about this young nucleus of offensive weapons and quarterback, obviously, that they have going on. And 2, I think that the way they were very thoughtful in how they drafted these receivers for Drake May.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good thing as well. If you went out there and you got, I love Roman Wilson. I love Roman Wilson.
Right.
But that's a 1st and 2nd level separator. That's a guy that's a jitterbug over the middle type of guy. Not that it wouldn't have completely worked with Drake May, but that's not really what the short game is not Drake May's calling card. His calling card is the deep ball. So you might as well go out and get 2 receivers that can win down the field and win deep. I really like how much thought they put into building the puzzle and having the pieces fit together. And I think that that's something that maybe they didn't do enough in the past, especially on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, it's an old Belichickism, right? It's not about collecting talent. It's about building a team. And we talked about on Friday how the goal now has to be to build around Drake May. And that's what they did. They didn't just go out and draft receivers. They drafted receivers whose best skills line up with Drake May's best skills and vice versa. So
yeah,
you have this big arm downfield quarterback who maybe isn't the most accurate. And then you went out and you got 2 receivers who can make plays down the field and know how to go outside their frame and catch the football. That makes sense.
Yeah.
There's a pairing there. So on the wide receivers, I really like how they operated. Look, I don't know what's going on with A.D. Mitchell.
Yeah.
I liked him better than Jalen Polk, but if they had information I didn't, which is obviously incredibly possible, then I like Polk over, say, even, and I know he was much later, but even over a guy like Troy Franklin.
Yeah.
Because if you think you have a plan for that, just outside slim burner receiver, if you have a plan for that guy, you already have that guy in the building. You don't need to draft him again.
The faster version, just by the time speed.
Whereas I don't know that they did have a guy like Jalen Polk in the building, and they didn't pay him and let him go to the Raiders instead.
Yeah.
They had a guy. So when I look at it, too, in terms of being complementary, Jalen Polk, there's a lot of similarity to Jacoby Myers and to what I think they wanted Juju Smith-Schuster to be last year.
Yeah.
With Javon Baker. And it's Javon, not Javon. Yeah, it's Javon.
Cool, I like that.
That's what Brugler had. Well, now, you'll love this as a Celtics fan. the Patriots have they have the Jays now. They have their own Jays. Jalen, Javon.
Like that. And I gave you that comparison though about I'll tell you.
And I don't know. I think it's Jaheim Bell, but if it's Jaheim Bell, even better. But I think it's Jaheim.
I love that they have the Jays.
They have the Jays. Jalen Polk,
you did that on
Baker.
purpose. Now I'm all hot.
I thought you'd enjoy that.
All right. Love it.
But yeah, so Jalen Polk, I think, is the guy they wanted Juju Smith-Schuster to be.
Yeah.
And Javon Baker kind of profiles as the guy you think they wanted Devontae Parker to be.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. Like, Juju still might be on the team. We'll see what happens. But, long term at least, they went out and they clearly felt these are roles they want filled. But the guys they had in place weren't filling them.
Weren't good enough.
And so they went out and, they profile the same. The question is, can they play the roles at a higher level? That's what this whole thing's all about. Ultimately, we're going to find out. But it feels like they gave themselves a chance to, they got guys that they can plug in. They got guys that make sense. They didn't just go out and be like, well, this receiver, so we're going to take him. No, there really feels like a calculated plan here, and all the picks fit together.
Yeah, it's a great way of putting it. Now, with that being said, because we're not always just sunshine.com. I gotta play both sides of it a little bit. I think the one thing that you can definitely say for the Patriots in this draft is that when we look back on this draft in hindsight, the three players I think that we're going to look back on and wonder if they got it right. Xavier Legette, who I think they wanted to trade up for in the first round. Mike Reese reported they wanted to trade up. He said his hunch was Xavier Legette. Everybody's hunch is Xavier Legette. It certainly sounds like that was their target when they traded up. Ladd McConkey, because he went with the original pick in the second round.
I wonder how much. Oh, you're saying that we're comparing them to? Yeah. I don't think the Patriots were interested in McConkey.
I don't think so either, and we can get to that in a second. But fair or not, the Jays, which I'm doing now. That's awesome.
There you go.
The Jays.
Just remember who told you that one.
Are going to be compared. Their careers are going to be compared to these guys. That's just the bottom line. It's the same thing that we do with Tyquan Thornton and George Pickens, right? Like,
did you add Troy Franklin on that list?
And I'm about to add Troy Franklin to that list. I think Troy Franklin at the top of the fourth round was somebody that they were trying to target, and they got jumped by Denver. So my one criticism of this draft, and again, we don't know if they're going to be right or wrong comparing them to those receivers. So I'm not going to hold it against them until they're wrong about it, right? We don't know. But my one criticism of this draft was I do think that they weren't quite aggressive enough at times when the run started to happen at certain positions. Receiver, they basically there was a 6 receiver cluster that went at the end of the first round, top of the second round, and they took the 6th one.
Right.
Tackle, it definitely seemed like they missed the boat on the pure left tackles. The Patrick Paul, Kingsley Sumatia, Brendan Coleman, right? That group on day 2. And they end up taking a guy that I think can play in the league. I don't think Caden Wallace is a bad prospect. I think he's a better prospect than some of the consensus boards had out there, certainly. But we're talking about a position convert. Like, the people that I've talked to about Caden Wallace feel like at right tackle or guard, they feel pretty good that he could be a starter in the league.
Yeah.
At left tackle, that's a different story. We'll see. And then in the top of the 4th round, I believe, and this is just my belief, I believe they got jumped for Troy Franklin. So they end up getting Javon Baker. Hopefully he's just as good, if not better. And we don't have to look back on this as, A.J. Brown to N'Keal Harry, right? Like, I hope that's not the case.
Right.
But that will be, in hindsight, what everybody will hold their hat to. So transitioning to Jalen Polk, their first pick in this draft. We got an email here. And this, I feel like, Alex, is what a lot of people feel about their day 2 in particular. Yeah. So this is from Alexander. He says we're going too easy on this regime. If you're going to criticize Bill for overdrafting players, we have to criticize Wolf and Mayo for taking the 150th prospect with the 68th pick. So we're talking about Caden Wallace. I thought he was talking about Polk here. Polk is in a similar boat that some people had ranked lower.
I don't think Polk, I wouldn't call Polk overdrafted just because of the way the board fell.
Yeah.
And Wallace is the one. And look, you could argue he was the best tackle on the board.
Yeah.
But for a team that desperately, my nitpick with the Wallace selection isn't that they drafted him. My nitpick with the Wallace selection is you're a team that needs a tackle. Once you see that run start happening, you need to move up and not get left with Caden Wallace.
Correct.
That's the second guess there for me.
Yeah, that's totally fair. But I agree with you 100% that I don't necessarily view Polk as a total reach there. And I know that I thought the email was about both of them, but regardless, I think that's out there with both of those guys. So I just want to read you. Here are my tier 4 receivers, and
Okay.
when I did my final rankings, I'll read them in order. And this is before the draft, right? This is before the draft, and what I looked at with these guys is I saw these guys as like pure wide receiver 2s, like guys that could be good wide receiver 2s in the league. Not 1Bs. We're not talking about T. Higgins, Devontae Smith, not quite on that level, but a guy that can be a really good complementary receiver to a number 1 guy. Yeah, maybe like a Kendrick Bourne or like a Jacoby Myers or, somewhere along that lines. So first in the tier, I had Ladd McConkey. Roman Wilson, Troy Franklin, Jalen Polk. And I had a day 2 grade on Jalen Polk. And my point is that here, I'll keep reading actually the whole list. Jalen Polk, Ricky Pearsall, who I think was maybe the most overdrafted player in the entire draft by the San Francisco 49ers, but
he's going to end up being good because it's the Niners.
Maybe. Jalen McMillan and Jermaine Burton. Those are all my tier 4 guys that all basically went, except Troy Franklin, who slipped to the top of the 4th round for whatever reason. Those guys all went on day 2. And my view on it, Jalen Polk has his flaws. There's no doubt about it. He's not a speed receiver. I wouldn't call him a dynamic route runner. But Ladd McConkey, who's the most dynamic route runner at all these guys, certainly. But I think a lot of teams with Ladd McConkey had flagged some of his injuries. And I would also say that with Ladd McConkey, playing strength is a concern. And if you're a team that wants to prioritize stronger guys at the catch point, stronger receivers on run blocking, just bigger, stronger guys, Ladd McConkey at 5'11", 186 was not going to be your guy. Jalen Polk's got 20 pounds on Ladd McConkey in 2 inches. Similar thing with Roman Wilson, who I absolutely loved. But Roman Wilson is a small, sleek slot receiver. The comp that I used with him was always Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's got good speed. He's got good shiftiness. He's got great route running, but he's a pure slot. Like that is a pure inside guy without much size to him. Troy Franklin, I think hit the nail on the head. Slender outside receiver, but somebody that fits the same kind of body type and frame as a Tyquan Thornton. And then you get to Jalen Polk, who has obvious concerns about speed and separation down the field. There's no doubt about it. But they obviously felt that his positives, heady route running, play strength, catch point skills, are what they were looking for. And they weren't looking for the bursty slot receiver.
Right.
And so here we are. With that being said, like I said earlier, we are going to look back in Ladd McConkey. I promise you, every step of the way, Ladd McConkey is going to be compared to Jalen Polk.
Yep.
Every step of the way. What did you think of the Jalen Polk pick? But my point of reading out the tiers is that I agree with you that I don't think that this was a major reach because all those guys ended up going pretty much in a run of like a round or 2. And then there was also, McConkey, Ricky Pearsall, Polk. Like a lot of those guys went within the span of like 10 picks. So the run was happening. In this receiver class, we had heard so much about how great this receiver class was. The league obviously was crazy good, high on the receiver class too, because they just started taking these guys. The guys started flying off the board. So I would say that it wasn't a reach for Jalen Polk, but at the same time, they're taking a risk on his flaws, just like they would be taking the risk on Ladd McConkey's flaws.
If they like him, that's where they needed to take him. And a guy that can go outside his frame and get the football, a guy that has some vertical experience is going to be a fit in this offense.
Yeah.
So, would I have liked them to maybe move back into the first round and get Xavier Legette? Absolutely. But I think for where they were, it was a good pick. It was a fine pick.
Yeah. Yeah. Where do we, and this is, maybe we should save this for when we bring Javon Baker into this, which I guess we can do, and
it's so much easier to talk about this draft by position than going in order of picks. I've noticed that.
Yeah, so with Javon Baker, we just broke down how great the puzzle fits together, and we love it, the inside-outside guys. But I think the bigger question, and before we get into like kind of a scouting report on Javon Baker, is just who's the odd man out in that receiver room now? I think this is going to be the number one question that we get over the next couple months.
Yeah.
They have even if you want to say that they don't have necessarily a ton of high-end talent in that receiver room just yet, they have a lot of bodies in that receiver room. I think there's 11 guys in there now. So some of these guys are going to have to be the odd men out, and we're going to have to see what ends up happening there.
Yeah, and I think the two guys you look at are Juju Smith-Schuster and Tyquan Thornton.
Yeah.
Because at least with Juju, I mean, they've brought in a player with a very similar skill set who projects to play the same role, and they took him in the second round, so he's making the team.
Right.
It's just a matter of how much he's playing. And Gerard Mayo talked about earlier this offseason playing the kids and getting these younger guys experience. So I think in Juju's regard, you look at that. And then when it comes to Tyquan, it's just a numbers thing. He has no guaranteed money on his contract. They're keeping – you have Pop Douglas, Kendrick Bourne, and then the 2 draft picks are roster lock, so that's 4 guys. You feel like KJ Osborne probably is a pretty good shot to make the team, although he's now, I mean, they've got guys similar to him, and then does Jalen Reagor make it just off special teams ability and kick return ability? Yeah. Now you're at 6. So to me, it's Osborne, Reagor, Smith-Schuster, and Thornton for 1 or 2 spots. And if you want to throw Kayshon Boutte in there too, you can.
Yeah.
But it's those guys for 1 or 2 spots.
Yeah, I think KJ Osborne is going to make the team just because they signed him to this free agent deal. It wasn't a lot of money. It's not about the money necessarily.
Right.
They can cut him probably and not necessarily feel it all that much. But I just feel like you brought the guy in free agency and you gave him a little bit of guaranteed money. It'd be weird to then turn around and just cut the guy,
Yeah.
Unless he's terrible, obviously.
But then you have, so now it becomes Juju, Thornton, Boutte, Reagor for 4 spots.
Yeah, I wonder.
Or for 1 spot, sorry. 4 guys, 1 spot.
I do wonder with Juju if we start to hear murmurings of post-June 1 cut, maybe even a trade for a 2025, late 2025 pick swap, something along those lines. Somebody, I think it was Perillo, asked me what I see Jalen Polk's floor in the NFL. And isn't it kind of late career Juju Smith-Schuster? Isn't it kind of like last year Juju Smith-Schuster is his absolute floor, I feel like, and I know his floor could be like out of the league, right? I understand that, but just in terms of a floor of he's an NFL player, but I feel like it's Juju Smith-Schuster. In terms of his ceiling, I think he's a souped up Jacoby Myers. He's a little bit faster.
That's what I've said, yeah.
A little bit faster, a little bit better on the 9 route, a little bit more better down the field than Jacoby Myers is, but similar player, and both of them are incredibly strong at the catch point with great hands. So I look at those guys as pretty similar. With Javon Baker, the thing that's interesting about him, and I feel it, and I can understand it to an extent, because I do think there's a little bit more upside there with him. I think Jalen Polk is your typical low floor or high floor prospect. He's going to come in the league. He's going to stick in the NFL. Is he going to be an all-world receiver, Justin Jefferson? No, probably not. But he's going to be a pretty solid Jacoby Myers, Tyler Boyd. Those are some of the comps that you hear for him. With Javon Baker, started at Alabama, was buried on the depth chart behind some studs. Devontae Smith, Jameson Williams, John Mechie.
He's a 4-star recruit.
Yeah, 4-star recruit. Then transfers to UCF, breaks out, has 2 great seasons. One, last year led the Big 12 in receiving. And there's a lot of potential there with him. There's also a lot of inconsistency to his game. He has some of the worst. It's not that the volume of drops jumps at 6 drops last year. It's not like that is terrible. But I was texting you about this yesterday. He has some of the worst drops in terms of the outcome that I've ever seen, where he's dropping the ball on wide open targets and they're going for interceptions to the other team. They're ricocheting off his hands and going for interceptions. He had one against, I think it was against Boise State, where he was in the end zone, wide open in the end zone, like Riche Caldwell'd it, right?
Yeah.
Drops the ball and the ricochet goes off his hands and for an interception to the other team.
Yeah, it's not great. I mean, when you say that, it reminds me of Aaron Dobson, but I think, and that's probably his floor.
Yeah.
That being said, what he can do explosively on the other end is exciting. I don't know. I see some like George Pickens there. He's not quite as athletic, but he's a boomer bust receiver. Yeah. I think at his best, he's going to have games, even at his best, he's going to have games where he gets blanked.
Yeah.
But then, the next week he'll come out 4 catches, 115 yards, 2 touchdowns.
100%.
I just think that's the kind of guy he's going to be. So some people get really nervous by that kind of receiver. If they can go out next year and trade for Brandon Ayuk or draft a Luther Burden to be the dictating number 1, and then you have Baker and Polk next to him, that's a really good group. If you're drafting Baker to be your number 1, I just don't know that even with the flashes, I don't know that the consistency's there.
Yeah, the two guys, I think that you hit it on the nail on the head there with the consistency, because I felt the same exact way, and when I wrote about him today on Patriots.com, that's exactly what I said. He's going to have games where he's going to leave the Patriots in receiving yards, and he's going to have games where he's invisible.
Right.
And because of his playing style, not because he's not talented, but he's a big play receiver. So if he catches a 65-yard touchdown, that game he's going to be great.
Right.
Next week, if he gets, doesn't have that big target down the field, then his production is not going to be so good. So I compared him to two guys. From a body type athletic standpoint, he's Romeo Doubs reincarnated.
Okay.
He's exactly the same size.
Doubs was faster though, wasn't he? He's faster.
No, I don't think so.
No? Okay.
I think he's very, very similar. I think Mock Draftable had him. It's like a 98% match for the two of them. And they play similarly, where I think the one thing that I like about Javon Baker the most is that he's a pretty fluid, flexible route runner at the top of routes.
Yeah.
For a 6'1", 205-pound guy. He can sink and cut. He can stop on the vertical stem and create separation off his breaks at the second level. Is he a jitterbug? No, but he's got that fluidity and that ability to sink his hips and cut out of the break at the top, that he's going to create some separation doing that. He also creates some separation with his explosiveness through the route break, especially on like double moves. He can make guys look silly on double moves. So he's got a good setup of slant, dig out, go ball, right? And then he can win two different ways on the go ball. He can win down the field just running by you, and then he can also win on like a back shoulder or high point or something like that too, and just post up on guys. So he's got a nice foundational set of X-receiver route running ability that I think is encouraging. Jalen Polk, to me, right now, has verticals and crossers. Like, that's what he runs.
Yeah.
He doesn't necessarily, and part of it was because that wasn't a big part of Washington's offense. I looked this up, and Michael Penix never threw slants. He just doesn't throw slants. Like, that's just not, the short game is just not something that they did. They were bombs away all game, every game. And so Jalen Polk was targeted on in-breaking routes. I think it was a total of 3 times. He had 1 slant and he had 2 digs. And the rest of it is just goes, crossers, and hitches, right? Like, it's just, that's his route tree right now. Whereas I feel like with Javon Baker, there's a more complete projection of what routes he can run in terms of the full tree of X routes. Like I mentioned, first, second, third level routes that you see on film. The other thing I like a lot about Javon Baker is that not necessarily, I think saying if it fails on the outside is probably put the wrong way to put it, but he can also be a big slot. I think, he showed some ability, certainly to run the seam. Like that's there. And if you are a little bit concerned about the 4.54 and it doesn't necessarily translate on the outside in terms of the speed, if you get him matched up against linebackers and safeties, he's fast all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Right. So if you get him inside the formation, which he did, I think 27% of the time last year, is mainly an outside guy. But if you get him matched up on the inside of the formation, now you have seam runs, a nice zone sits where he's a big target. He's got a nice catch radius to just be QB friendly and sit in the middle of a zone. And you have some of that big slot potential as well. So I think that he can move inside and outside a little bit more than I thought when I originally watched him before the draft. He really felt like an outside guy. But I mentioned Romeo Doubs. The other guy that I think fits a lot, and happened to go to the same school as Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis is also a pretty good fit. Gabe Davis is a little bit bigger. He's got about 10 pounds on Baker, but they both ran 4.54s. They're both like 6'1" and change, and they're both these boomer bust players. So like Gabe Davis is one of those players where 75% of his production comes in 4 games every single year.
Right.
So those two guys might not sound to Patriots fans like, oh, we just got Terrell Owens. I get it. But the thing is that, like you mentioned earlier, if Jalen Polk is souped up Jacoby Myers and Javon Baker is Gabe Davis, and then they can go out next offseason and get that true number 1 guy, now you're building something.
That's what it feels like the plan is. So it's like you tweeted this morning you're getting ready to debate Will Campbell and who's the tackle from Texas?
Kelvin Banks.
Yeah, that's one from Texas, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just replied Luther Burden, and I mean, I'm just, having fun, poking fun, because that's just another name, I think.
And you've also told me about Luther Burden for like 2 years.
Just like I did Xavier Worthy, and how'd you end up feeling about him? So I replied to your tweet. I said, Luther Burden, just kind of having fun. Like, these are the names. Those are the three big names. And everybody started replying, no, they need a tackle. No, they need a tackle. Like, they're not going to take receiver. Like, I don't know. I probably will want them to take a tackle at this time next year.
Yeah.
Or, a week ago this time next year.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they just kind of seem to be good doing left tackle by committee. And it does feel like there's a long-term plan here at receiver. And, like, if you add a Luther Burden to this group, or you go out and you make a trade for Brandon Ayuk or one of these top receivers that's going to be available, you go out and get a DK Metcalf, now suddenly you're really cooking. So I don't think either of these guys was brought in to be the overwhelming wide receiver problem solver in New England. I think they were brought in to play next to that guy.
Yeah.
And that guy is still TBD, because when you took the quarterback third overall, which was the right thing to do, unless they were going to trade back up, and I don't even know if Leggett was that guy. I think he's maybe that 1B, maybe he's that T. Higgins.
Yeah.
But I don't think he was ever that 1A. There were 3, maybe 4 1As in this draft. Once you took the quarterback, you weren't getting that guy this year in the draft. And that's okay. They weren't going to fill every need in this draft. We had talked about that leading up. So I think the plan now is to figure out, next year who is being added to this group.
Yeah. So I think with Baker, there's probably a little bit more ceiling there in terms of if he hits his ceiling. I've been trying, Gabe Davis and Romeo Doubs are comps that I feel like that's who he's going to be in the league most likely if it works out. But I'm trying, ceiling comps I think are a little bit more difficult. Maybe a George Pickens is a little bit better than those two guys.
Yeah.
Maybe we put him in that category. That's not bad. I don't really.
Because do you think Pickens is the number one?
I think he's a 1B.
He's not consistent enough to be a 1. That's the big thing. If he was consistent, he would be, but he's not.
Yeah. See, I think nowadays in the league, the receiver position is so valuable and is such a sought after commodity that there's it's almost like in baseball where there's aces and there's number one starters.
I love doing that at corner. We can do that at receiver. Pickens he is by default the number one. He's the best receiver there. He's not an ace.
He's a number one starter.
Yeah, but he's not an ace.
Right. So, guys, that's how I would break down this draft. I think, you had guys like the big three, obviously Harrison, Neighbors, Adunze were aces.
Right.
Maybe Brian Thomas Jr.
is like fringy.
Maybe he's an ace. Maybe he's kind of a tweener in between those two things. And then you had a couple of guys that were number one starters. A.D. Mitchell, Xavier Leggett. I would say maybe Keon Coleman.
Well, the difference here is, to use this analogy because I use it for corners, every team has a number one by default.
Yeah.
And it's, do you feel good about this guy being your best wide receiver? An ace, you can have more than one ace. Like, I would say the Bengals have more than one ace.
Yeah.
The Dolphins have more than one ace. You put Jalen Waddle on most teams as the number one.
Yeah.
Eagles is the best example.
Yeah.
You put Devontae Smith on most teams as the best receiver. You feel great about that. You feel fantastic about that. But he's not their number one receiver, technically.
Right. I feel like the league is just that way. The last thing I'll say about Javon Baker, and then we'll talk about the linemen. I texted you this yesterday. My comp for Javon Baker, and you just said the Jays, which makes it even better, is Jaylen Brown, because Jaylen Brown will hit the three with the hand in his face from like 30 feet out, and then he'll brick a wide open corner three, and you're like, what is going on? Or he'll have this like terrible turnover, and then the next play he'll dunk on somebody, and that's Javon Baker to me. Javon Baker makes the hard stuff look easy and the easy stuff look hard.
Right.
And so if you can get him to, it's not that different than Drake May. Like, if you can get these two guys to just be consistent and always bring out the highlights and not the lowlights, then they're going to be great players in the league.
Right.
Most likely, though, which is why I think Gabe Davis works so well for Baker. Most likely, he's just going to be inconsistent for the rest of his life. Like, that's just the type of guy that's going to be. But that still could be that there are games where Javon Baker has like 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like that still exists within his game. It's just that the next week he's probably going to be invisible. So that's what you're going to have to live with. But I really liked watching him. He's a really explosive player. I think he plays a lot faster. Both these guys play a lot faster than their 40 times. I wouldn't get too caught up in 40 times with either one of these players. I think they play football in pads between the lines a lot faster because they're so damn competitive. Both guys are dogs. Like, both guys are super competitive, they're in-game athletes. Like, they're guys when the lights are
they're
on.
They're football players. They drafted good. They're good at football.
They're not good at underwear Olympics as much as I love the combine. That's just not going to be their thing necessarily. But you look at some of the in-game tracking data, some of the stuff from the Senior Bowl with Javon Baker is really positive too. He had the second fastest time at the Senior Bowl during Senior Bowl practices, only behind Tez Walker. But then you look at their discrepancy in 40 and you're like, how did that happen? Right? Like, he almost touched 21 miles an hour at the Senior Bowl running routes, which is an impressive speed, obviously. So I'm optimistic about these two guys, but I also won't think we did a good job of keeping it in context of I don't think that either one of these guys is a true number one down the road, but they're really good complementary players that once they do get that number one, now they really have an offense. Like, now they really have a big-time group. You mentioned Ayuk. I know it's a pipe dream, but somebody like Ayuk coming in here, now the Patriots really, on paper, have a very, very good offense in terms of personnel. Let's see if it all comes together.
Hang on. I have the list of guys who will be like the Bryn and Ayuks next year. Let me pull this up real quick. It is T. Higgins, assuming he doesn't get extended off the franchise. DK Metcalf, Terry McLaurin, DJ Moore, Jalen Waddle, Garrett Wilson. All right, and Devonta Smith's got an extension since I wrote this. So they're probably not getting Garrett Wilson. Jalen Waddle, DJ Moore, Terry McLaurin, DK Metcalf. I'd take any of those guys. I love DK Metcalf. That'd be a ton of fun, and he would be ideal with Drake May.
Yeah, that would be a match made in heaven. Those two. I'm optimistic about it. I think it's both guys have reasons to like their games and be excited about their games, even if I think a lot of people, and myself included, sometimes get caught up in the 4-3 guys and just want the pure speed guys, the pure track guys. We've been down that road before with Tyquan Thornton. We've been down the other road before with like the size speed guy and N'Keal Harry. I know people, when I say size speed, they're like speed with N'Keal. N'Keal Harry was fast for his size. He had a very, very good weight-adjusted 40 time. But we've been down the road with those athletes, like those guys that are just these raw athletes, and it hasn't worked out. When I look at Baker and Polk, I look at two football players. I look at two guys that know how to run routes, that know how to get open, that know how to catch the ball, that know how to create with the ball in their hands, in Baker's case a little bit. So I'm optimistic about both those guys hitting their, what I project to be, their comfortable NFL projections. Gabe Davis, Jacoby Myers, maybe with a little bit more juice. Like, I think that those are both realistic. Going to the offensive line, you're right. It is easier to talk about this draft in position groups.
At least through here, and then we can do the late day 3 guy. To me, you have Drake May, you have the top 150 receivers.
Yep.
You have the top 150 linemen, and then you do Dial, Joe Milton, Jaheim Bell.
Then everybody else.
Yeah.
Don't sleep on Jaheim Bell, though.
We're gonna get to Jaheim Bell. I'm not.
Don't sleep.
I'll just say, for where they got. Obviously, Drake May is my favorite pick. He's the best player, but all things considered, where they got him and all that, Jaheim Bell might be the best pick of their draft.
Yeah, I think Javon Baker is probably the best value they got in the draft. Probably a guy that is a top 100 talent in most receiver drafts, but there's so much talent in this receiver draft that him, Troy Franklin, those guys are, in my mind, top 75 picks in other drafts.
Yeah.
But unfortunately for them, but better for the Patriots, there's so much talent. And I remember when I did my best available for day 3, and I was going through some of the guys that I was shocked by how much receiver talent was still out there, and we knew this was going to happen. I was still surprised by it. You have Troy Franklin, Tez Walker, Javon Baker available for you at the top of the 4th round. That does not happen any other year.
It's not supposed to happen.
Yeah. Offensive line, I totally understand the concerns with Caden Wallace flipping sides. I think they're legitimate. The comparison I always, someone told me, I think it was Carm Basillo. I don't think it was Scar. I don't remember. One of the offensive line coaches that's been through here told me to take a pen. You righty or lefty?
Righty.
Righty. Write me something with your left hand.
Yeah, no, this isn't. I talked to a former college offensive line coach. I know what you're saying. It's not as simple as right with your right hand, right with your left. It's, right. You move the paper based on where you are. So if you're used to playing right tackle, so now it's in front of you. Now you go to right guard. Now it's over here. Now you go to center. Now it's over here. Now you're at left guard. Now you're writing with your offhand all the way over here.
Yeah.
And now at left tackle, you got to write with your offhand all the way over here. I just, tips of my fingers on the pen. Have to write my name. That is the toughest move on the offense. Right guard to right tackle and vice versa is easier.
Yeah.
Like it's easier to move between, just stay on the same side and move inside to outside.
Everything flips. Your
versus,
drive foot,
right.
Your drive foot's different. Your inside foot's different. Your plant foot's different. Your hands are now flipped.
Yeah.
It's all different. Now, can he do it? Yeah. Yes. Like in theory, he can do it. I think the things that you look at.
It's a project, though. Like,
it's a project.
I don't think people realize how hard being a true swing tackle is. Like, people didn't appreciate Ladrian Waddle enough when he was here. They spent, let's be honest, they spent 2 or 3 years and nobody noticed because there were bigger things going on. Yeah. They spent 2 or 3 years really missing Ladrian Waddle. And
of all people.
So they signed the UDFA tackle, Zuri Henry, has over 800 snaps at left tackle and right tackle in his career. That's a swing tackle.
Yeah.
A guy that has played exclusively right tackle for 4 years, but you think he's athletic enough to make the move, isn't a swing tackle. He's a right tackle. You're going to try to play it left. That's different.
Yeah, there were some guys like that in this draft, though, to be fair.
Like true swing tackles?
No, guys that, like Amarius Mims, Tyler Guyton.
Yeah.
Those guys played right tackle in college that everybody thinks are athletic enough to flip.
Guyton's unique because he was the right tackle in a lefty quarterback offense. So he at least
like
had
Roger
some
Rosengarten.
blindside experience. Yeah. Like those guys are it's still not easy for them because you still got to move the sides.
Yeah.
But there's certain things you do as a blindside protector on either side that you don't do on the strong side. Certain things you're going to have to deal with that just, at least you have that kind of experience.
Yeah. So when I watched Wallace, and I should mention too that down at the Shrine Bowl, he did take some pass sets on the left side. They flip them all. Like that's what they do. Senior Bowl, same thing. Guyton, those guys all played some snaps on the left side.
They have Joe Alt working at right tackle at the Combine, lucky for the Chargers.
Yeah, so I think Wallace, when you watch him, he's a twitchy mover. He's very twitchy out of his stance. He can really get out and into his landmark initially. The issues that I think present themselves, especially against speed, is more on like kicks 2, 3, 4. Right? It's not right. It's not right out of his stance. Right out of his stance, he's usually pretty good. As he kicks out of his stance and slides with his feet, his pads tend to elevate, and then if he feels pressure, speed especially coming off the edge, he's what's called an early hip opener. So instead of sliding his feet like somebody guarding somebody in basketball and trying to stay in front of him that way, he'll just turn and start to run. Right? He'll turn his hips and open his hips open, and then almost like get into like a gallop. The issue with what happens when when players do that is that they leave themselves very vulnerable to inside counters. So you get up the field like that, well-schooled rushers like in the league, they're going to inside spin you all day long. They're just going to say, all right, you're going to overcompensate and try to jump out to that landmark out there. I'm just going to spin inside, or I'm just going to arm over, swim inside.
Right.
So you have to. His big concern, I would say right now, is that the fact that his lateral movement later in his pass set causes a short corner. So he gets into this early hip opening sequencing. Now, with that being said, he's got really good hands. He's got good length, 34-inch arms, and he knows how to use them. He plays long, and he has really heavy hands. Like he can stun guys, he can slow guys down, and I do think that his initial movements out of his stance are twitchy, or they're
right.
There's good burst there. So I think that there's something to work with him there. I would just say that if I was switching him over to left tackle, I would be a little bit concerned about really true speed guys. Miami just drafted Chop Robinson. Him coming off the edge at him against Miami in a few months. Like that would concern me a little bit about him at left tackle. But in general, great anchor, great hand strength, great length, knows how to use it. pretty good initially out of his stance in this past set. And when you have those combinations, like you should be able to translate that to the league. And let's just hope that, Drake May is as good against pressure as I think he is.
Yeah, it goes back to this seems to be their plan. It's been their plan the last few years that they haven't added a real consistent left tackle. Like, I think Trent is a good player. Trent Brown's a good player, but he was kind of a wild card in his own right. And then on top of that, you've brought in Calvin Anderson, who was incredibly inexperienced and was mostly a right tackle in the NFL. Like, he is a true swing tackle. You brought in Riley Reif, who was a right tackle and older. You tried, guards out. They tried City So, who was a college guard, another position mover. And now this year, their two top options for left tackle, it seems like, are a guy that hasn't played left tackle since college, has only played right tackle in the NFL in 6 seasons, and a guy who was a right tackle in college.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, so that's my thing with Caden Wallace. If he'd been like their second offensive lineman, great. You got a guy that's experienced, good right tackle, probably going to give you some snaps at guard as well. Like, solid second lineman pick. But for a team that has needed a left tackle for so long, to walk away from this without a true left tackle, I can't shake. That's my biggest second guess in the draft. It's not necessarily Wallace himself.
Yeah.
It's how do you not come away? They attacked the wide receiver position so aggressively, which you could argue was the third biggest of the three needs, simply because at least they had depth at wide receiver.
Yeah.
Say what you will about there's guys in there that can play. They didn't have the top of the depth chart, but there's guys in there that can play. So to attack the wide receiver position the way they did, and then just kind of say at left tackle, we'll figure it out. It feels like they've been trying to figure it out at left tackle without an obvious answer for 3 or 4 years now, and it hasn't worked. And maybe Caden Wallace works out. Great. If he does, awesome. It's a brilliant pick. But that's hardly a guarantee when you have a guy moving sides like that.
It's my biggest second guess of the draft because your shows are big on this. Felger's big on this. Did they misread the board?
So that's the one where I'm fine with them letting Polk fall to them at 37. That one makes sense to me. I can understand that.
Yeah.
Once Patrick Paul went 55th.
Yeah.
That needed to set the alarm bells off. And all right, we need it. This is about to because most people thought Paul was a third round pick. Once that guy goes there, you need to recognize, everybody's going to panic here at tackle.
Yeah. We
need a tackle more than most of these teams. We need to get up there and get a guy, whether that's, and I know I sound like a little bit of a hypocrite saying Blake Fisher because I just went on the whole thing about, true swing tackles. Fisher at least played left tackle in college.
Yeah.
And it seemed like they really liked him.
And is a higher rated prospect. Not that the consensus really matters all that much, but he's a higher rated prospect.
Well, so the point being, I can see why they maybe wouldn't have been interested in Kingsley.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's right. I think they were looking for older, more experienced prospects, guys without the injury history. But Blake Fisher checked all the boxes of the guys they took, but at least he had some left tackle experience.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely seems another positive for Caden Wallace. 40 career starts at Penn State is a lot.
I like Caden Wallace's. I mocked him to the Patriots. I like his makeup as a prospect.
Yeah.
In a bubble.
Yeah.
I don't like him as your potential future left tackle.
Yeah, I hear you.
I think that's a step too far.
So the one thing I will say though, and this isn't to carry the water or defend them, but I think the one thing I will say is that based off of their actions, I do feel like they have so much confidence, and maybe it's not right to have this much confidence, but I think they have so much confidence in AVP scheming around tackle issues and Scott Peters coaching up tackles.
A lot of this draft is they put it on the coaching staff.
Yeah.
It's a lot of what this draft
is. And I think that their thought process, specifically with AVP, is that they are going to be so play action, bootleg, move the pocket. Now they have this athletic quarterback, and Jacoby can do the same thing. If it's Jacoby Brissett, he can also move around. They have these quarterbacks that can move around, that can throw off platform, that can throw outside the pocket, and they don't necessarily need to expose their left tackle to 30 one-on-ones on an island every single game. They're going to probably try to shrink the one-on-one exposures for their tackles in pass pro as much as they possibly can by staying ahead of the chains, by being really good on early downs with explosives, and not necessarily getting into a situation where you're dropping back and traditionally dropping back to pass 35 times a game. And maybe that's the way that they look at it. And then I also think, Scott Peters is one of those guys, and we've seen some videos about him when they hired him and things like that, that is one of these technique gurus. Like he has a school with his father that's off to the side that coaches up prospects, works with prospects in the off season. He has a lot of that going on where he's like one of these private tutors as well.
Yeah.
And so I think they think that they're going to be able to coach these guys up and coach around it. And we've talked about it a lot in the past. You can coach around one weak link on the offensive line. I think that they look at this and they say, if left tackle's a weak link, we will just try to, do things to make it easier for that guy, whatever the case may be. And I can see how they feel like they could get away with it. I do. Well,
but that kind of hinges on what happens at left guard, which brings us to Leeden Robinson.
Yeah. So Leeden Robinson, to me, was a classic case of they got jumped for Troy Franklin by Denver, and we're just going to turn in the card with our best available player. And they had the highest grade on a guy like Leeden Robinson. And as much as I hated it, when they made the pick, I was just like, not another guard. You've got to be kidding. Especially there, right? Because it's just another guard in the 4th round, just like they drafted 16 of them last year. I couldn't believe it. I was just, they really, day 3 was off to an awful start for me, and Javon Baker rescued the day. Like, if they didn't make the Javon Baker, it felt like a lot like last year with Pop Douglas. Like, if you didn't make that pick, I would have been like, oh, God. Like, this has just not been a good day. Leeden Robinson, I think, was their highest graded player at the time. They didn't necessarily have a great grade on anybody that was at a position of need, another tackle, maybe double dip there. Or
well, I also wonder, some people thought coming into the draft that Leeden Robinson could play tackle just because of his length. So I wonder if they were going to see them try him at tackle.
Oh, God. I think that his feet and his range is in a phone booth.
I'm not saying it's going to work, but...
Yeah, I don't think he's got tackle feet at all.
They're trying. They try everybody to tackle. It's kind of what they do now.
Oh, God. I think with Leeden Robinson, it's one of those old adages, and it's similar to what we're going to talk about with Joe Milton when we get to the quarterback. You don't go broke taking offensive linemen.
Yeah.
You just don't. If you beefing up the trenches, if all else fails, if you don't have a great grade on a skill player, you don't have a great grade on a DB or something like that, you will never go wrong with taking linemen on either side of the ball. If you really are convicted about a guy and you feel like Leeden Robinson has a starter grade for us and this is gonna work out long term, you never go broke taking trenches. You just don't.
See, that's just what it's like. But I look at it, and so 68 and 103, right? Caden Wallace and Leeden Robinson.
Yeah.
Could those have become a pick in the 50s?
Right.
And
it's a fair point.
Right. You get
a real
potential left tackle.
Yeah. You wonder if, again, I think Troy Franklin was their guy in the top of the 4th round. And so they were holding out hope they were going to get Troy Franklin there. If you had told them in hindsight, hey, Troy Franklin's not going to be there for you at 103,
right? Then
they probably do package the pick and try.
But realistically, you should not have expected Troy Franklin to be there at 103.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a dice roll, and it didn't work out. Yeah. So that's a second guess for sure. I agree with you. You could have packaged those picks. I think that they probably would have preferred to just dump the pick altogether and move back after Troy Franklin went off the board. And they didn't really, this is just a guess, they didn't have any suitors, so they just took the best player on their board.
I'd be surprised by that, or maybe they just wanted too much for the pick.
Yeah.
But
I do think that, they didn't make any extra picks, and I do think they wanted more picks. I believe Elliott Wolf when he said that he would have preferred to add more picks. I just don't think that they necessarily had the trade to make it happen. And I actually really did like the pick swap with the Chargers.
Yeah.
Because of the way the draft dropped off after the top 125 players or so.
Right. They didn't need one. Every time I was doing a mock draft, 137 was just an annoying pick.
It was just in the middle of nowhere.
Right. So I have no problem with them giving that up. But again, could they have given that up to maybe move up from 34 or move up from 68? Well, I guess they couldn't.
They probably tried to move up from 34 with it.
Yeah.
But I really like that pick swap.
That was a good trade.
Yeah, it was, because they moved up 27 spots into a spot where now you're getting a top 100 player in Javon Baker with that pick. If you look back at it's going to be Jalen Polk and Javon Baker
Yeah.
versus Ladd McConkey and some dude I'd never heard of that the Chargers drafted.
Yeah, the kid from Maryland. I think he's a corner.
Yeah. So I like the Patriots side of that trade. I do.
Yeah, me too.
So those are your linemen. I guess really quickly with Leeden Robinson before we move on. What does this say about the guards that are already in the building?
Nothing good.
Nothing good.
In Cole Strange, we saw the pictures last week that he's still in street clothes, so you wonder what his status is. And yeah, between him, I think City So is probably safe because I think they, if Mike Owen was going to play tackle, but we could have a wide open competition at left guard come training camp.
I would love that. You know me. I have no reason whatsoever to give that job to Cole Strange. Like there's no reason to have him sharpied into that spot. None whatsoever. I think that he is 110% competing for that job.
Yeah.
And should be. I would actually think that City So is more entrenched at right guard at this point. Cole Strange, hasn't been able to stay healthy, has been up and down when he has been out there.
Right.
I think he's competing for that spot. And if Leeden Robinson's better than he is, then Leeden Robinson should play. I think Mafi, you saw a lot of the movement and range be a real concern last year. Is he a fine, fourth lineman that, is going to be an interior depth guy for his career? Yeah, I mean, I think he is an NFL player, but he's not a starter. I just don't see starter. And so between City So, Leeden Robinson, Cole Strange, you need to have two of those guys turn out to be decent players. And then you're all right. I think Jake Andrews is center.
I think so too.
So I think that's where they're at. But yeah, that was definitely one takeaway with Leeden Robinson was, what's it say about the guards that they have in the building? And the other takeaway is this is a classic Patriot guard. Like this is in a phone booth, people mover, downhill guard. I was actually surprised by that. This is not a zone blocking guard, in my opinion. Now, maybe they feel differently and they're more than entitled to tell me I'm an idiot, but I don't necessarily see the lateral movement or the explosion out of his stance to be like a great, combo reach blocker in outside zone. So maybe they're going to be a little bit more gap heavy than we thought. Maybe that's looking way too much into a fourth round pick and they just like the player and they'll figure it all out later. But it'll be interesting to see if it's Onwenu, So, Andrews, Robinson, and then whatever happens at left tackle. That's not exactly like a dynamic, athletic zone blocking line. Like it's not really filled with a bunch of guys that outside zone is a huge fit for. So maybe they become more of like a counter crack toss, that kind of downhill team or gap team, which you can, run bootlegs and still move the pocket off of things like that. So it'll be interesting to see how they go about that because it doesn't really seem like on paper that they have an outside zone offensive line. You look at the Packers, you look at the Niners, you look at those teams in the Falcons, like in the past when they've been a really like a North Turner type offense. They draft these like Cole Stranges, like 300 pounds, super athletic offensive linemen that are not big, that are not necessarily great anchors or people movers, but are very, very good laterally. And the Patriots, that's not Leeden Robinson. They did not draft a great lateral mover here. So it'll be interesting to see where they go. All right, here we go. Keep going down. Dial came first, right?
Yep.
Before your boy. Marcellus Dial. I think that this is exactly...
You ready to spin the dial on defense, Evan?
Well done. Oh my. I think that this is exactly what we thought they might do in terms of targeting a day 3 corner. You target a day 3 corner with some traits, some speed, mid 4.4 guy, some length, some good ball skills. Got his hands on a lot of passes.
Yeah.
31 pass deflections, I think it was, or pass breakups. This is a developmental outside corner that might have some free safety flex to him as well. If he fails at outside corner, and we can talk about why he might fail, I could see with his ball skills and the amount of ball hawking instincts that he seems to have by getting his hand on 31 passes in college, I could see him potentially moving to free safety at the league, and he's got that 4.4 speed to have the range to do it as well. So I think there's some free safety ability there, but I think he starts at corner, and they try to have him develop at outside corner.
The big thing for me with him, very clean player, wasn't penalized a lot
in
college, and that's huge for them. That's huge. So you take out that size, who has clean hands, who's not too grabby, and you coach him up from there. Maybe he does play some safety too. I think he's an ideal special teams fit. Another high character guy. I think that was obviously a focus. So I was a little surprised though. Nothing against Dial. Like, I think he's a good player, but if you were to ask me if you're telling me they're only going to pick one player on defense, what position, I would have thought defensive line edge rusher, because all of those guys, well, now Barmore's re-signed, but so it's Barmore, Keon White, Sam Roberts, Anthony Jennings. That's it up front for guys signed beyond this year. Godshaw's a pending free agent. Aquale's a pending free agent. They signed what's his name from the Steelers? Armand Watts is on a one-year deal.
Watts.
Like, all those guys, even Jeremiah Farms on a one-year contract. Like, all these guys are pending free agents. So I thought they'd try to get ahead of it and just add a body up front. They didn't even add a UDFA defensive lineman. They did add an edge rusher, Jet Bush, but that was surprising. And look, good for them, because they needed help in the secondary too. And if you're telling me he just played corner, so it's a lot harder for me to project him as a free safety. But if you're telling me you think he can play free safety, like, obviously I was hammering the tables that for a need. Great. I was just a little surprised. I thought the defensive pick was going to come up front.
Me too. Gabe Murphy went undrafted.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. I mean, I know he's undersized, but that was crazy to me. I thought that somebody like that, chest piece up front, rush in line, rush outside, maybe take Josh Uche's position in a year from now.
Right.
But I think one of the things that Gerard Mayo said after the draft was that some of these second and third year players, they want to give those guys opportunities. And I look at up front, a guy like Keon White. I don't think Keon White, I never have loved Keon White in a 2-point stance up on his feet. I think he's too clunky for that. I think he's too heavy for it. But maybe Keon White comes in a little bit slimmer, comes in a little bit faster, more explosive, and he does play up on his feet.
Yeah.
I think that they were maybe a little cognizant of that they didn't necessarily want to bury some of these guys from last year's draft or 2 drafts ago, or like a guy like Alex Austin, on the outside, right?
Yeah.
I think that they wanted some opportunities to go into camp and see what those guys have. But I'm with you. I thought it would be defensive line. The one thing about Dial is that he has good ball skills, good instincts with the football. Back to the quarterback to read the football and read the catch point. He has this little hitch in his turn and run, where when he flips and runs, he it almost is like he gets stuck in neutral for a second and then it opens up, right? And so fast, really dynamic outside receivers like he's going to see in the NFL, they're going to eat it up when he does that. And he has a good recovery speed to maybe make up for it. But there's just it's a weird thing. It's almost like he presses pause or like the controller breaks or something like that, and then he goes. And so if they can clean that up, that's what Mike Pellegrino's here for, and he's pretty good at developing these guys.
They do. Dial's the exact kind of corner that they've done a great job developing for years and years and years and turning into a player. So
yeah,
I'm not telling you he's automatically going to be a hit, but I'm not writing him off either.
Yeah. Before we get to your favorite pick of the draft.
Oh, we got another guy to go, and then we get to my favorite.
No, we're about to get to your favorite. Sun's out, fun's out. So get ready for warmer weather with the latest in stock and ready to ship outdoor styles from Bob's Discount Furniture. Shop everything from weather-resistant wicker seating and barbecue-ready bar and dining sets to on-trend indoor-outdoor rugs, umbrellas, and decor. Stop and shop now to embrace springtime at Bob's Discount Furniture, the official furniture store of the New England Patriots. Alex, your favorite pick in the draft. I don't want it. Don't lie to me.
I thought you were screwing with me when you texted me.
Don't lie to me. I jumped out of my seat upstairs in the admin level, stared admin Neil Perry in the eyes and said, "You are effing kidding me," right?
Yeah.
Literally. When he said out loud, Joe Milton III, I couldn't believe it. There was 2 picks that maybe got me out of my seat. Javon Baker was pumped about that pick, especially after the guard. Like, God, shoot me, right? And then they make the Javon Baker pick. That's not against Leeden Robinson, by the way. It's just the position.
It's a positional thing. Yeah.
And then they make the Javon Baker pick. I got probably a little bit too excited about that, not gonna lie. And then they go Joe Milton III, and my jaw was on the floor. I was stunned.
So here's the thing. I didn't think they'd do it because I thought if they drafted Joe Milton, it was going to have to be at 137.
Yeah.
I thought one of these, next year quarterback teams, the Giants, the Raiders, the Saints, and the Saints did end up taking a quarterback. They took Spencer Rattler. I thought one of these teams was going to be like, yeah, we may need a quarterback anyway next year. So this guy's got a ton of traits. Let's bring him in and see. And maybe we save ourselves having to go on the carousel next year. And I think part of the reason he fell is just quarterbacks as a whole. How many times did I say during the pre-draft process, Evan? Quarterbacks, either take them first or you take them last.
That's what this draft was.
I think that's going to be the new NFL philosophy. The day 2 quarterback is kind of unnecessary.
There was a huge gap between Bo Nix.
It was the biggest in NFL history.
It was Bo Nix and Spencer Rattler, right?
It's like 150-something picks.
It was wild.
It's the biggest in NFL history, and I think that's going to become the new norm. I think the guys that are day 2 fringe picks are just going to start going in the first round because teams don't have the stomach to wait on them. That's exactly what happened with Bo Nix, if you read Albert Breer yesterday.
Yeah.
And then, so all right, all the day 2 quarterbacks are going on day 1, and that just leaves you with day 3. So I thought the Patriots were going to have to take Joe Milton at 137, which I just thought with all their other needs was too much.
Yeah.
It was too much. I would not have liked to pick at 137. At 193.
Why not?
Here's the thing about the 6th and 7th round of the NFL draft. Most of the time, like sometimes you're looking for specialists or maybe guys fall because like Kayshon Boutte last year was like this really unique situation.
Yeah.
But most of the time on day 3, you're drafting individual traits. You're not drafting a player and saying, we like this player's full makeup. It's this guy does this one thing at an incredibly high level, and maybe the rest of his game isn't what it needs to be, but we want to see if we can find a way to use this one thing and make it great. That's usually what you're drafting late on day 3. And I would argue, of the individual traits in this draft, if Joe Milton's arm strength isn't number 1, it's in the top 3. I think the 3 most impressive physical traits in this draft outright are T'Vondre Sweat's size and power. Like, that's one thing, right? That big, that powerful. Xavier Worthy's speed.
Yeah.
And Joe Milton's arm.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a single trait in the draft that's more that's the top tier. If rank them how you want, I think honestly I'd put Sweat and then Milton and then Worthy. That's how I'd rank them.
Yeah.
But you weren't getting T'Vondre Sweat at 193. You weren't getting Xavier Worthy at 193. So with Joe Milton, sign me up for the trait. I don't see the downside here. It's the 193rd pick. If you want to wet your pants over the 193rd pick, I guess go for it. Have fun.
That is one of my pet peeves about the draft, and I've been trying to be better about this and not pick on our listeners who are awesome or whatever.
Right. Well, our listeners are smarter than that.
But one of my biggest nitpicks or pet peeves with the draft is people that get upset over 6th and 7th round picks.
Right.
Guys, these are the lottery tickets of lottery tickets.
Unless it's a guy where you object, if there's something you're like, oh, this guy will be bad for the team. Usually that's off the field stuff.
Right.
Joe Milton is like the man.
Yeah.
Joe Milton, everybody you talk to.
And
no, but you listen to
that was my favorite was the combine when he just goes.
Well, it's his deepest throw. He turns around. He's not even looking.
I know.
He's so cool. So, and he also said he doesn't like the Bazooka Joe nickname.
Oh, too bad.
No, I respect it. He had another one.
If he has another one, I'll call him that.
I got to find it. I think it was like Mr. Rocket or something.
Okay, well, we should get that because on Patriots.com, I should not be writing Bazooka Joe if he doesn't like Bazooka Joe. So we'll come up with something.
I'll find it.
Else.
Our friend Zach.
Yeah.
You know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Zach, I can't pronounce his last name, but he's started covering the Patriots this year. He interviewed Joe Milton at the Combine, and first off, came across great, and all. He also said Bazooka Joe's not his favorite nickname because I'll try to find it. But so here's the thing with the pick. Is Joe Milton going to Kirk Cousins, Drake May? I don't think so.
Yeah.
But
he's acting way more tame. Inside, you were way more excited than this.
Yeah,
admit it.
I got more calls and texts after they picked Joe
You
Milton.
got drafted.
It felt like I got
drafted.
You got drafted. It really was insane. I'm trying to write the thing and my phone wouldn't stop.
Because this is your guy.
I heard from more people after they picked Joe Milton than I heard from on my birthday. I'm not kidding. That's not a joke. I'm serious. So
I remember to wish you a happy birthday this year.
You did, this year. By the way, I found it. So Joe Milton. This is from Zach Ventola at Any Patriots Day on Twitter. Interviewed Joe Milton at Senior Bowl. It's a terrible name. A bazooka can only go so far, and he likes Mr. Rocket. Mr. Rocket. Maybe
Mr. Rocket has some innuendos that I don't know.
Maybe
if he
Rocket
wants.
Joe. Maybe Joe Rocket.
Maybe.
So anyway, so here's the thing.
Yeah.
Here's the thing with the pick.
Back to the player.
Back to the player, but I want to make sure. All right, when we're talking about Mr. Rocket,
Sorry, that doesn't work for me. Yeah, right. Yeah, no, not good.
So is he going to Kirk Cousins Drake May? Probably not.
Yeah.
But there's a couple ways you can go here. Like, he's going to tear it up in the preseason.
Yep.
Because he was good enough last year at Tennessee, and when you get into the second half of these preseason games, it's basically the guys he was playing at Tennessee. Like, it's
Feels
college
like
level football.
a better version of Malik Cunningham in that sense.
It's good. There's going to be a lot. He was a year too early, because if he was in the Malik Cunningham role last year, oh boy, that would have got nuts.
Yeah.
But he's going to tear it up. I think there's a potential for him to be a package player. He's not going to play tight end. He was very definitive about that.
I don't think which he shouldn't.
He shouldn't. No, and everybody's like, "Oh, big guy, you should play tight." I don't know that he can play tight end.
Yeah,
because one of the big issues with him at quarterback is his footwork. How's he going to run routes?
Yeah.
And he's fast. I don't know that he's fast enough to separate. He's more – the reason he's an effective runner is because he's 6'5", 235 pounds, and he gets the outside against corners who have no shot to tackle him.
Right.
So he's a quarterback, and good for him for wanting to stick there and all that. But when I say package player, this is actually – so I'm not going to say Taysom Hill.
Yeah.
Because that's not. But when Jacoby Brissett was in Indy with Andrew Luck, do you remember this?
Yeah.
They would use Jacoby Brissett for Hail Marys, quarterback sneaks, and they had one sort of designed read option package for him on offense.
Yeah.
That role for Joe, and look, can Drake May throw Hail Marys? Yes, he has a big arm, but it's not as big as Joe Milton's.
Yeah.
Can Drake May run with the football? Yes, but if you need short yardage, why have your third overall pick take the beating?
Right.
When you can throw Joe Milton, who's bigger and more powerful of a runner, you can put him out there and let him go be a moose. And then maybe you have some other pet. You have basically the Malik Cunningham package where it's mainly read option and there's a couple options for him to throw off of it.
Yeah.
Like, that could be a valuable role, and who knows? Maybe, like, everybody wrote off, and I don't want to use the Taysom Hill comp because, again, I don't think Joe Milton's going to play tight end, nor should he. But remember when there were teams that were willing to give up like a second-round pick for Taysom Hill off of that weird package they were doing?
So that's an interesting side piece to all of this.
Can you develop Joe Milton enough?
He's got trade value.
You're not going to get a second-round pick for him, I don't think, because he's just older. Like, he's too old for that. But if you draft Joe Milton in the 6th round and in 2 years you trade him for a 4th, it did pretty well.
Yeah.
So there's a number in worst-case scenario, he doesn't make the team the way most 6th-round picks don't, and we get a fun preseason. And this will be the most exciting preseason in Patriots history.
Yeah.
I've said that. But, worst case scenario, doesn't make the team. We got, a couple fun preseason games out of it, whatever, so be it. So I obviously like the pick, and that's my thought on it.
That picked up momentum like I wanted it to there at the end. At first you were trying to couch
Everybody's heard the lines. Yes, if you need somebody to throw it 5 yards, he'll throw it 80. Everybody knows the lines. Now he's here. I'm going to give my football take on it.
No, I didn't mean it like that. I just meant I know you at first were trying to be not excited about the pick, and then you picked up the momentum.
I'm excited about it. What do you want me? I can't do a backflip. If I could do a backflip like Joe Milton, I'd do it. Right, but I can't.
So here are my thoughts on the pick.
Yeah.
First of all, I watched the tape that I watched of his. I watched 2. I watched Alabama and I watched Vanderbilt, which was his best game. I know Vanderbilt stinks, but really he lit it up. He threw 4 touchdowns and 300 plus yards in that game. So I just watched it to see what it looked like at its peak. But against Alabama, he threw a touchdown pass against Alabama. Oh, that was about 45 yards in the air. And when I say rocket launcher, and
did you watch the Kentucky game?
No, not yet.
You should watch the Kentucky.
I'm gonna watch more.
Okay, watch the Kentucky.
I only watched a couple before the draft.
Kentucky game is the quintessential Joe Milton game.
Up and down.
It's just so it's funny. When they drafted him and I saw somebody put out a highlight reel of Joe Milton.
Yeah.
The first play is an incompletion. Yeah. But he throws the ball 76 yards off his back foot on a dot.
Yeah.
And it's an incompletion, but it doesn't matter. And that's Joe Milton. It's the Joe Milton experience at its essence.
Yeah, I think what stood out about the throw against Alabama, which I'm sure you remember.
Yeah.
The biggest thing I think that stood out about it.
The touchdown to the pylon, right?
Yeah. Down the left sideline, and the receiver had to reach out for it a little bit.
I think that's Squirrel White.
I think that the biggest thing that stood out to me was that this thing was on a line. It's not this thing is he can throw the teardrop deep ball.
But he's not. Yeah, no. People need to understand that it's not just he throws the ball far.
No,
he
throws the ball through the door.
Do you remember the old Peyton Manning sprint commercial.
Yeah.
You know, if you like 6'5", 230-pound quarterbacks, laser rocket arm.
Yeah.
It's Joe Milton.
Yeah. He can throw the ball on a line 50 yards in the air.
Right.
It is an absolute rocket launcher. And I think the one thing that I was even mostly impressed with is that usually when you have these 6'5", 238-pound quarterbacks with rocket arms, it's this long wind-up thing, right? Like, he gets it out quick.
No, that's...
He's got a snappy release, man.
I can't stress this enough. The thing that's so much fun about Joe Milton, that's so exciting about Joe Milton, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Like, most of what he does, he's the only quarterback on the planet that can do it.
Yeah.
You're not really supposed to be able to, off your front foot, half release on a clothesline 55 yards. Now, again, you got to be able to control it. And that's why he was a 6th-round pick and not a 1st-round pick.
Yeah.
Because he can't always control it. But some of the throws he makes are truly one of one.
Yeah.
They're just, in college, in the NFL, you're not going to find anybody else who can do that.
Yeah, so it's a rocket launcher. It's not we're not talking about like teardrop bombs. We're talking about there's smoke on the ball.
Right.
Right? It's a rocket launcher. I was really
I don't know if you, sorry to cut you off again. I don't know if you know this story. His receivers at Tennessee would wear 2 pairs of gloves because they were worried about their fingers being broken.
I would not want to catch that ball.
Yeah.
I was really impressed with his actual mechanics in terms of his throwing.
Yeah. When he uses it.
In terms of like rotating on the axis and getting the ball out quickly in that compact release, the way that he throws the ball mechanically is actually not all that far off from Jaden Daniels. He just has, and I say that because Jaden Daniels I think had probably the cleanest mechanics in the draft.
It's him or McCarthy. Yeah.
Yeah. So really, really clean. And I'm not talking about footwork. I'm talking about actual mechanical chain of your body, you know?
Right.
Hips, shoulders, rotating on that axis, compact release. I was really impressed with all that. His footwork is very inconsistent. Like, sometimes he's really light on his feet and he dances around pressure and he steps into throws and things like that. And other times it looks like he's stuck in mud.
Right.
It's odd.
But even when that happens, sometimes it doesn't matter because he doesn't put his feet into the throw and he still throws it 60 yards on a rope.
Yeah, but where it does matter is with his accuracy.
Right.
You know, and that's, he's going to spray the ball all over the place, and his decision making he can lose, the radar can shut off.
Well,
you know.
What'd you make of him saying that his favorite quarterback to watch is Brock Purdy?
Oh God. I could not see a more polar opposite quarterback.
I like that. Because he goes, Brock Purdy is really good footwork.
Yeah.
And that's why he watches Brock Purdy, because he wants to improve his footwork.
Yeah.
That's real self-awareness. Like, good for him.
I've said multiple times with Joe Milton, he's day 3 Anthony Richardson.
Well, no, he's day 3 Drake May.
I don't think so.
No?
No, I think Drake May is more naturally, like, instinctually a football player.
Okay.
I think Joe Milton is toolsy. And he can run too. We should, 4.6 speed.
Good runner. Yeah.
Yeah, good runner.
Especially scrambling.
Yeah.
You can't let him out of the pocket because he will kill you.
Yeah, day 3 Anthony Richardson. And at this point in the draft, Howie Roseman was doing a press conference, and I thought that he gave one of the best answers I've heard about what day 3 of the draft is all about, and it was exactly what you said just a minute ago. At day 3. You're drafting a trait,
yeah,
and it better be special if you think that guy's going to pan out in the league.
Right.
The guys that have 16 different positives on their scouting report are gone. So you're looking for one thing that separates this player from that player. And with Joe Milton, there's no doubt about it, the arm talent is different than anybody else.
Yeah.
And so you're taking a chance on the arm talent, and maybe AVP and Ben McAdoo behind the scenes can get him coached up. I think the biggest thing is that, like you mentioned, best case scenario, he's Kirk Cousins, right?
Right.
And I'm not saying that that's what we want to happen. I'm
right.
just saying if it does happen, it does happen. Worst case scenario, he doesn't make the team. Middle scenario, he hangs out around here for a year or two, develops, lights it up in the preseason, and maybe he has some trade value down the road. With all that being said, I think we have to be a little bit fair and not hypocritical. I don't love it for Drake May.
I do like how he's handling it.
I like how he's handling it, but we talked about this all the time with Mac Jones. It's a little bit of mind games out of the gate because, let's face it, in shorts and a T-shirt come end of May, early June when we go out there for minicamp, Joe Milton is going to look just as impressive in shorts and a T-shirt as Drake May, if not more. And my concern is not us, not the people here, not the people listening because they're educated. My concern is that we're going to get reports and we're going to get buzz that Joe Milton looks better than Drake May.
So here's what I'll say to that. I
don't
disagree.
And how does Drake May handle that?
Right. We were very hypocritical. And I think if Drake May can't handle it, he's not going to be able to handle this league.
That's fair.
So there's that side of it. This is the Packer way. They're going to draft a quarterback every year, every other year. This is what they're going to need to do. He's got to get used to it. So in that sense, I don't think it's pushing buttons too much. If they start fooling around with the depth chart and they start being unclear about who's playing and things like that, then yes, then it's too much. For now, we want Drake May to be in this league for 20 years, right?
Yeah.
The Patriots are going to draft other quarterbacks over the next 20 years. That's just, it's going to, there's no way.
But if Tom Brady can get insecure, let's face it, that's what he was, insecure about Jimmy Garoppolo.
But what did he do with it?
That was the GOAT. And he was already well established into his career.
Let's see if Drake May can use it to fuel him. I'm not. You're right. We shouldn't be hypocritical, and we said they pushed the buttons too much with Bailey Zappi and Mac Jones, and that's a fair point. But at the same time, they're going to draft quarterbacks.
I don't love it for that reason.
If this is it,
but I like Joe Milton.
Yeah,
I don't love the pick.
If Joe Milton in the 6th round is enough to ruin Drake May, he was probably not going to make it to me. And I think he's mentally tougher than that.
But we always say this. Why? Like, why even put that out there?
This is their philosophy. They always draft. They're going to draft quarterback next year or the year after that. This is what they do.
And it's also the Packer way, too.
Right. That's what I'm saying. So just, he's got to get used to it. If he can't handle just this, that's more of a red flag about Drake May than it is about the front office.
I hear you. But we always say with Mac that you're testing him just to test him.
Well, that was to another level. Drafting when they drafted Bailey Zappi, I liked it. I did. I said this is good. They need a long-term backup. Brian Hoyer's on the older side. Remember my comp for Bailey Zappi the whole time was Chase Daniel. This guy's going to be in the league for 15 years, and he'll maybe throw a total of 100 passes. Yeah. Like, that's who I thought. And you need that guy. You need a good backup quarterback. That's important. If, they start pulling Drake May out of games, and I don't mean like in a package sense. I mean, if they start benching Drake May for Joe Milton after one interception coming off an injury, then I'll say it's too much. If Gerard Mayo refuses to say Drake May's name and only talks about Joe Milton, then I'll say it's too much because it will be too much. But
we both know. We both know that it happened with Malik Cunningham.
Yes.
We both know that there's going to be a section of people that are going to sit there and always say they should try out Joe Milton. They should try it.
It's absolutely going to happen.
Unless Drake May is Justin Herbert right out of the gate is just awesome.
But Evan,
that's always going to be
there. If
they
didn't draft Joe Milton, there were going to be people saying that about Bailey Zappi.
Oh, no. Come on.
Yeah. Oh, there's still people saying it. As soon as they drafted Drake May,
as soon as people see Drake May throw a football, they're going to forget all about Bailey Zappi.
Right, and Joe Milton.
I don't know about that. Because Joe Milton's going to throw the football just as pretty.
You're right. We should be intellectually consistent. I was fine when they drafted Bailey Zappi a year after, and it's a little different. It's the same draft, but drafting Bailey Zappi after Mac Jones at the time made a ton of sense because they needed a backup quarterback. Jacoby Brissett's not here beyond this year. They needed a backup quarterback. Joe Milton stylistically is similar to Drake May. That makes him a good backup quarterback for Drake May because they can run the same offense. If it doesn't go any further than that, it's a good pick. If they start screwing around with the dynamic, then yes, that's going to be a problem, just like it was before.
The outside noise is going to screw around with it. And I agree with you. And I feel like people are going to, he should be tough. Yeah, he should be mentally tougher than that. There's no doubt about it that he should be mentally tougher than that. But he was the guy for like 12 hours. I already have people in my mentions talking about Joe Milton. Like being like, oh, you mean Joe Milton, right? Like, no.
No, just
Drake May's the guy.
Wait till they get out and Drake May starts throwing the football.
I hope so. I'm just telling you that I would have preferred if they had drafted Joe Milton next year, like they drafted Bailey Zappi next year. I would have been all fine with it.
So let me
but
ask you,
I would have hoped
felt...
that could we just have Drake May with a clean slate and just give him the quarterback room behind Jacoby Brissett, who we all know why Jacoby Brissett is here. Jacoby Brissett knows why he's here, and it's just a clean transition.
First off, we don't even know if Joe Milton's going to make the team. Second of all, how would you have felt if they drafted like Michael Pratt?
Less as worried. Because my concern is that it is really easy to get caught up in Joe Milton's physical traits.
Oh, I know. Look who you're talking to.
Right, the arm and the mobility are legit.
But so they are for Drake May too.
I know, but I'm just telling you that, like I keep saying, when we get out there for OTAs and we get out there for minicamp and it's shorts and a t-shirt and it's glorified 7-on-7 and that kind of stuff, and on top of all of that, Joe Milton was in the college football for 6 years. He's much older.
You might think higher of Joe Milton than I do.
It's not about how high I think of Joe Milton. I'm just telling you that there's a world where Joe Milton and Drake May in spring minicamp look about the same. Just like there was a world where Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi at different points looked about the same. And just like with them, we said, this is unnecessary. Now, I'm with you. They took it to a whole nother level, and hopefully this regime doesn't.
Right.
But
I think so far it's business as usual. If they take it further, then yes, it's an issue like it was with Mac and Zappi.
And I'm not trying to put anybody down and flex on people, but I just know that there are going to be some casual observers out there that aren't going to know the difference.
Well, it's our job to educate them.
That's all.
Just like we tried to do with Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi.
All right, 7th round, then we'll open it up to end the show to the couple calls and emails and things like that. 7th round, Jaheim Bell. Don't sleep on Jaheim Bell.
No.
Don't sleep.
Pound for pound, like in terms of where they drafted him, all of that, I think Jaheim Bell's their... Drake May is Drake May, right? But after Drake May, Jaheim Bell, all things considered, might be their best pick.
He's one of them.
Yeah.
Good pick.
I had him as like a top 120 guy.
Yeah.
And they got him at 231.
Yeah, great value where they got him. A clear role in an Alex Van Pelt offense, in a zone misdirection heavy offense. A clear role there.
Yep.
And when
we did leak, he's that motion tight end.
Yeah, he's a guy that can come underneath the formation and hit the flat and hit it with speed and then run after the catch with the ball in his hands if he's got a runway there and some open space. He can run the seam. He can run crossing routes. He's just not quick or agile at the top of the route. Like if you're asking him to break down at the top of the route and be Travis Kelce and get open, that's not his game. But if you're just going to set up ways for him to run 4-6 across the field this way and run across the field that way and run up the seam here and that kind of stuff, I think Jaheim Bell has a role on this team. Like there's a clear role of how they could use him as like want to call him an H-back, a move tight end, off the line tight end, whatever you want to call him.
Fullback.
Maybe a little bit fullback. I think there's a clear role for him on this team. I think I'm a little bit excited about what they could potentially do with this guy. His catch and run skill is legit.
Yeah.
And his speed
again,
is
you're
legit.
drafting on trait, like his ability to make a play with the ball in his hands. That's what you're taking. I think part of the reason he fell, honestly, is teams didn't know what position he played.
Yeah.
He's such a tweener that...
Well, because of his size.
Because of his size.
Yeah, he's
and he didn't test
undersized.
well at the combine either.
He ran like a 4.61, which is good for a tight end.
The way the tight ends ran this year, he was like... You had Tip Raymond running a 4.5.
Yeah.
By the way, Tip Raymond, top 100 pick, smash mouth football, not dead. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise.
That was one of the bigger reaches of the draft.
That was awesome.
One of the bigger reaches.
Tip Raymond going 100 picks before Troy Franklin. Like 50 picks before Troy Franklin. Loved that.
But yeah.
Loved that.
This is not a reach. This is the opposite
No,
of
this
reach.
is the opposite of reach. I think part of the reason he fell is you're not going to draft Jaheim Bell and plug him into a role that already exists in your offense. Because outside of maybe Atlanta, I don't think any teams have that role in their offense. Like, people want to compare Jaheim Bell to Kyle Juszczyk. He's not Kyle Juszczyk. That's not who he is.
Yeah.
I don't know that his role exists. But for the Patriots, it's a unique opportunity where they're building their offense from scratch. So you can put in a role for Jaheim Bell, and you can kind of build some stuff around him.
I think in this type of scheme,
I'm trying to remember, how much did the Browns use a fullback last year?
They used an eligible offensive lineman.
Is that what they did?
It was he was like a center / fullback is what they had him listed as.
Okay.
I think in this, so he's 6'2", 241, which for a tight end is extremely undersized. But his testing numbers are good. He ran a 4.61, which is an 88th percentile for the 40-yard dash. 35-inch vertical, 72%.
Maybe I'm thinking of the
percentile.
Did he not have a good Senior Bowl? He had something that.
I don't know, but I mean, I can look up his RAS score. He's an athletic guy. There's no doubt about that.
Well, I was going to say, I think he tested. I think he's a better athlete than he tested.
Maybe. I mean, that's pretty good testing numbers.
Oh yeah, it is. All right.
Yeah.
Well, even better. Look,
8.45 RAS because of his size. Obviously,
Yeah.
that's but elite speed and great explosiveness.
Great.
Yeah.
Like, good find, and he can, there's absolutely a role for him because he's not super. He doesn't overlap with Hunter Henry or Austin
No.
Hooper. There's different things he can do. He can make plays with the ball in his hands. I thought that was a tremendous pick. That was great. I couldn't believe he was still on the board at that point. I had to double check.
Yeah. So when they signed Jonnu Smith in 2021.
Yeah. Oh, so this is another one. Sorry. Remember how I said, all right, Devontae Parker or Javon Baker kind of replaces Devontae Parker. Jalen Polk kind of replaces Juju Smith-Schuster. Obviously not apples to apples player type, but Leeden Robinson, Cole Strange, Drake May, Mac Jones.
Yeah.
This is another one. Jaheim Bell, Jonnu Smith.
Yeah. So Jonnu Smith in 2021, he's just not a fit for a Josh McDaniels type of offense.
No, he couldn't figure out the scheme touch, guys.
Yeah. Now, in this type of offense where you're hitting the defense with so much eye candy and misdirection, where it's, look, everybody's going to move to the left, but then we're going to bootleg and we're going to actually hit the point of attack to the right, things like that. You create this horizontal stretch to the field. That's the whole idea, right? Is to stretch out the defense horizontally. And when you have these guys that are like Jaheim Bell that are 240 and run a 4.61, you sneak them out the backside of the formation, and now there should be green grass in front of them with the ball in their hands, and he's one of those guys that can eat up the green grass. That's the idea. That's, again, it's similar to the receiver picks that they made earlier in the draft. There's a role and there's a projection of how this guy fits the offense. So what I look at and say about this draft a lot on the offensive side of the ball, I think the quarterback has to be a top-down organizational decision.
Yeah.
But when you look at some of these other players, Polk, Baker, Jaheim Bell, I think it tells you how much influence Alex Van Pelt and Ben McAdoo had in this draft of this is how this is what we're doing offensively. This is our scheme offensively. This is what we're building the playbook out of. These are the types of skill sets that we need. And I think that tipped the scales in a lot of these cases towards a Jalen Polk, towards a Javon Baker, towards a Jaheim Bell, because those players do ABC better than the guy that maybe we all had rated a little bit higher.
Again, it's that old Belichickism, right? It's not about collecting talent; it's about building a team.
All right, there's the draft. We did it.
UDFAs.
With time to spare, let's answer some emails and some calls, and then you can give me your favorite UDFA. All right.
All right.
Todd is in North Carolina. What's up, Todd?
Hey, guys. Just a quick thing that I'm a little concerned about was Andrews didn't seem all that, comfortable or effective last year. He was on skates more than a few times, and I know a young quarterback, even a veteran quarterback, does not like to get pressure up the middle. Are you guys concerned at all with him as center, and do we have anybody to back him up at all?
Yeah, David Andrews you're talking about, right?
Yep.
Yeah. It's a fair question, Todd. Thanks for the call. Appreciate it as always. David Andrews in pass protection took a step back last year. There's no doubt about that. Now, the question is, was he making up for so much what was going on at guard?
Yeah.
Onto his left and his right that he was just, there's just too much to cover up. That's definitely possible. The offensive line's a 5-man unit. It's as good as the person next to you. If they're better at left guard and better at right guard this season, next to David Andrews, does he have a much better year in pass protection? I think that's definitely possible.
Yeah, I'm with you on that 100%.
With that being said, it's on my radar of, is it run blocking wise, he was still really good. Pass pro wise, he took a step back. Is he starting to slip a little bit? It's potentially there. We mentioned him earlier in the show. They clearly drafted Jake Andrews as a long-term center replacement for David Andrews. So do they have somebody in the building on paper, yes. I don't know if Jake Andrews can play. We saw him play for like 1.5 games or something like that at the end of the year. But on paper, yes, they do have somebody that can play center long term in Jake Andrews. All right, a couple of the questions here. Let's see here. Okay, that one's a detailed one. So there's one question here about something that I wrote about. Here it is. About if this draft, if Drake May hits, this is what I wrote in my recap of the draft. If Drake May hits, the draft is a success.
Yes.
And Paul here just wanted to push back a little bit on that and says, as a draft and develop team, if you only hit on 1 of 8 picks, then how can it be a success? I just think that if you draft Drake May and he's a franchise quarterback, he's Justin Herbert, Josh Allen, CJ Stroud, whatever name you want to use, I think you'll figure out the rest.
Yeah, it's not their last draft. I mean, does it slow down the process? Absolutely. But if you have we just saw what the kind of pretzel you have to go into when you need a quarterback. So not needing that frees you up a lot more down the road.
Yeah. Question about Dial at free safety. We talked about that. I think that's a possibility. I think he starts at corner, but I think there is a possibility that he could play free safety down the road. Let's see what else we got here. There was one other good question. See, now I'm like losing all these places. Okay. This was a question about Leeden Robinson, and I think we touched on this a little bit. But the question here is just if they saw guard as a need, then why wait so long to take a guard, and then B, also, why would they see guard as a need?
Right.
I don't necessarily think that they saw guard as a need. I think they saw offensive line as a need in improving the offensive line. And I mentioned earlier in the show when Troy Franklin went off the board, the pick before when Denver traded up into that pick, my guess is that they just took the best player on their board, who happened to be Leeden Robinson.
Well,
so I don't think
why was the guard ranked so high on their board?
Well, it's not about positions, right? Like, it's just about.
You don't think there's a little bit of a factor there?
Not if you're just stacking the board. Like, if you're
guess.
If you're talking about guys you're targeting, right, in the draft, and that the need obviously is a big play in there. But if you're just talking about purely who has the highest grade on this entire board, probably not as much.
I mean, I wouldn't feel great about it if I'm Cole Strange.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, this is a good question from Mauricio. He asks, and I will fully admit that I do not think either one of us are prepared to stack these players right now in the 2025 draft. But
we'll see.
Here we go. The draft ended 3 days ago, and people are already asking us about the 2025 draft. And I'm here for it. I'm ready. I'm ready for it.
Oh, so you're actually going to get into the college football of it all this year?
We'll see how the Patriots are doing.
We might have to get you the video games. So you can really learn something.
So, people say that we had somebody that replied to one of my tweets today.
Yeah.
And I was going to refer him to you. He said, it'd be nice to know which games I should watch during the college football season to keep an eye on prospects.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
I got to admit to you, like, I have so much to do when it comes to the Patriots during the season, and I'm traveling and things like that. I leave that to you.
The traveling is what kills you, because you need Saturdays, obviously.
Yeah, that I leave that to you to tell me what I should be watching when it comes to college football. But this question from Mauricio Mexico, the 2 tackles that everybody's going to talk about at the top of the draft are Kelvin Banks Jr. from Texas and Will Campbell from LSU. Those 2 guys are considered to be very, very high-end tackle prospects.
Alabama's got a guy too, Tyler Booker, but he's kind of like that next.
Yeah.
He's the Olu Fashanu.
And then the other guy is your guy who you've been telling me for 10 years is going to be a good player.
Literally 2 years, because he was a true sophomore last year and went off. Luther Burden from Missouri.
Luther Burden,
who's going to win the Biletnikoff. I'll give you one more, too, just in case. And people are probably familiar with him. Michigan as a corner, Will Johnson.
Yeah.
Who dominated during their run last. He might have been the best player on that team last year.
Yeah.
And he was a true sophomore, so obviously he wasn't in the draft. But, obviously we'll see. With Travis Hunter's going to be fascinating.
Yeah.
Because what position is he going to the draft as?
I got to be honest with you, I have no desire.
For Travis Hunter?
Yeah.
He was your favorite player last year.
I'm not because of the player. I have no desire to bring Dion anywhere near this thing.
All right. Well, I mean,
desire.
I take him as a corner. I think
he's gonna. I don't need LeVar Ball up in all of the Patriots business. I don't need it.
Look, Will Johnson is, depending on what Travis Hunter does,
Yeah.
ends up doing this year and ends up declaring as, because he's not going to play 2 ways in the NFL. He can't. It's just too physically taxing. He'll be like Marcus Jones, but Will Johnson is probably the best corner in this draft. And look, if everything behind Gonzo kind of falls out and Jonathan Jones, a free agent, he's going to be 31 and whatever, like we'll be talking about corner as a major need again. And Will Johnson will be, if they're in the top 10, Will Johnson's going to get a lot of talk in terms of the Patriots because he's their kind of corner.
Yeah, so Kelvin Banks and Will Campbell, I haven't studied them specifically, but obviously I watched a lot of those offenses for the draft this year with Jaden Daniels and with the Texas guys and things like that. I think that the thing that stands out about both of those guys is both guys have really good size for the position.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that either one of them is like, super. I think Banks is maybe a little bit more athletic just in terms of like getting out of his stance and things like that. If I'm right off the top of my head here, how I stack them right now is I could not tell you.
It's irrelevant because we're going to get so much more information.
Yeah.
Ranking them is irrelevant.
I also think that
these are just, at this point, it's just here are guys to watch, and then you watch them next year.
Yeah.
So that we can rank them when the time comes.
Yeah, I also think that it will be good for everybody with these two tackles and with other players on these two teams to not have such loaded supporting talent. Like when you have a quarterback like Jaden Daniels,
right.
It makes everything better. When you have receivers like Texas did last year, it makes Quinn Ewers and everybody look good, right?
Right.
So we'll see what it looks like for Texas and Kelvin Banks and Quinn Ewers without A.D. Mitchell, without Xavier Worthy, without Jatavian Sanders, without Whittington and all these guys. It'd be interesting to see.
So Luther Burt, because he is a pretty good quarterback, Brady Cook.
Yeah.
Does that apply or?
Sure.
It shouldn't. No, I'm saying he's good on his own. He doesn't need Brady Cook as much as part of me, if they did the wait for quarterback thing, I wanted them to take Brady Cook because how fun would it be for the Patriots to have a quarterback named Brady Cook?
Oh, my God.
He wears, not that he would here, but he wears number 12.
So the biggest thing is, he's not going to wear that here? You sure?
Brady Cook?
Yeah,
well, first off, I hope they don't draft him.
You're not going to wear number 12?
You don't think Brady Cook? You just say it'd be fun. Let Brady cook.
I would say the biggest thing, though, is that if you had to ask me right now, right today, and maybe we might disagree on this, maybe, because you love Luther Burden so much, but if you had to ask me right now, right today, left tackle, 1-1 need for the Patriots next year, and I don't think it's particularly close. As much as I love receivers, and I think they can use that number one, that's the cherry on top for this skill group, hopefully. Let's hope the Jays, which I love, the Jays, let's hope that those two guys are good and hit and all that kind of stuff. And we'll see if they're busts and they're terrible, then receiver becomes a big conversation. But I think drafting a left tackle, like a Joe Alt type of left tackle, which is these two guys are in that category from what I've seen.
Yeah.
Drafting that guy for Drake May to protect his blind side for the next decade, I think is priority number one.
I don't disagree. I wanted them to take a left tackle second in this draft, and I think we're looking at Will Campbell and Kelvin Banks, but they seem to be okay doing left tackle by committee, and it wouldn't surprise me if I would go left tackle. I'm with you.
Yeah.
But it also really wouldn't surprise me if they went receiver and just continued to kind of rotate left tackles through because that's what they've been doing for years now.
Yeah. So Chad in Atlanta emails in and says that the quote that Wolf had, the system that I come from, we don't talk about XZ slot. We just try to add really good receivers, and it would end up working out for us. He said that worried him. That I think that he was lying to our faces when he said that.
Yeah, he was just hyping up his player.
Yeah, I think when you look at the way that they constructed their picks, we talked about it for a long time at the top of the show. Javon Baker and Jalen Polk are completely complementary players that are one's an X, one's a Z. Like I think he's full of it when he said that.
He's just hyping up the guy he just took. That's just playing the game.
Yeah, I don't think that he ignored that at all. Actually, I think he did the opposite. I think that they were very mindful of making sure that it all fits together. The other O-line question here from Andrew is about right tackle. It said that last year right tackle is a revolving door. Yada yada yada. How worried are we about both tackle spots? They are going to play Mike Onwenu at right tackle. We'll see how it goes, but that's the plan.
You know what? Even if it doesn't work, I think Caden Wallace is a good right tackle.
Yeah,
and you kick Mike Onwenu back inside, and I'm not worried about that. Maybe it takes him a couple weeks to figure it out, but that's kind of what this team is at this point.
Yeah.
I'm good with that. I just wish they had a real left tackle.
Another question about a 2025 draft. So I'll just reiterate: Will Campbell, Kelvin Banks Jr., Luther Burden. Those are Luther. Sorry, stumbled out on that one. Luther Burden, Kelvin Banks Jr., Will Campbell.
Yeah.
Those are the three guys you guys want to watch. Those are the three guys that we're going to be talking about.
When we get closer, I will have you guys know I'll have that stuff. When we get to like August, I'll start talking about here are the players for Patriots fans to watch. So we'll get you. We'll get a little bit of sleep, but we'll get you.
I want to end it on this note though. Christian Barmore signs a 4-year contract extension.
UDFAs.
Oh yeah. Okay, fine. Give me
This
your
is
one.
what we do. We do the in-depth.
Give me your one UDFA.
So, okay. So my favorite is Mikey Victor, but there's just so many corners. I don't know how he makes the team. Big corner from Alabama State.
Yeah.
Deshaun Fenwick, the running back from Oregon State.
Yeah,
is going to have
that one I could see.
Real chance to make team. 6 foot, 223, bowling ball back. He'll compete with Kevin Harris for that third running back spot. And then Jacob Warren, the tight end from Tennessee, he could have a chance too because they don't really have a blocking tight end, and that's what he is.
Yeah.
So I think you look at those two guys, John Trey Hunter, those are the guys you're looking at to make this team.
Running back, UDFA running backs always have a chance to make football teams.
Yeah. And look, so I think part of the reason Fenwick went undrafted is he was in college for 6 years. He only had more than 100 carries in a season once. He just never really played. If they run this preseason like Bill used to, we're going to see a lot of Deshaun Fenwick.
Yeah.
So he'll give him a real good chance to see what he can do.
Yeah. Really quickly before we wrap, Christian Barmore, 4-year extension.
Love it.
Obviously, this is not what the show today was about, but we wanted to get our quick thoughts on this. Personally, I just love it for the main reason that this is a 24-year-old player who's ascending, who you're keeping in-house, and I don't want to come off like everything is anti-Bill. It's just different. It doesn't mean that Bill's way of doing things was wrong or whatever. It's just different. And I think when you look at this draft, my big takeaway too from this draft, they obviously draft based off need on offense, which they should have done. If Bill was running this board, and we talked about it off the air with Johnny Newton.
Yeah. If
Bill was running this board, he would have drafted Christian Barmore's replacement this year and let Barmore walk. He would have let Marty Mapu take over for Kyle Duggar. He, in the long run, might end up being correct, right? Like Bill might end up being right. I'm not saying that he's always wrong about it, but that's what they would have done. And I understand why people are like this way better. You're keeping guys that you like, that are good football players, that fans know, that fans can buy their jerseys and get behind. I know that stuff may be overrated, but it feels good. It does feel good to have Barmore around here for the next 4 years, 5 years, whatever it is.
Yeah, and what you want is the core tenets of a defense are having, a playmaker, not just a good player, but a playmaker at each level. You have Barmore at the first level.
Yep.
You locked up Duggar on the third level.
Yeah.
I don't know if we count Judon as a second-level player, but he's even on a contract year, so we'll see what they do there. But,
and you have Gonzo on the outside.
Right. If you want to continue to be an elite defense, this is the kind of guy you need to have, and they kept him around.
Yep, no doubt about it. All right, whether you're in the game or betting on the game, you'll need a game plan. DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sportsbook partner of the New England Patriots, provides you with everything you need to build your personal betting game plan so you can get in on all the action while practicing safe bets. Visit DraftKings.com/responsible-gaming to learn more about all the safe betting tools DraftKings has to offer. Hope is here. 800-327-5050 or gamblinghelplinema.org. Must be 21 plus. Play it smart from the start. GameSenseMA.com. Physically present in Massachusetts. See DraftKings.com/responsible-gaming for details and state-specific responsible gambling resources. PU's up next. We'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
Thank you for downloading this podcast. Subscribe on Apple, Google Play, and everywhere else you listen. Like the show? Please rate and review us. Listener comments and ratings help keep us high in the podcast rankings so new listeners can find us. Be sure to check Patriots.com for more news and more podcasts.